Okay, Brad, I got the problem right now, and I'm a little flustered because, at one point I was told that this was going to be a forever solution. I had to be really careful when I was like lining stuff up right, and I was told that the glue was permanent on my headphone hook that I put on like 2 or 3 years ago, and you're not going to believe it. It's not permanent. It's starting to peel off.
Adhesive not living up to its claims?
Look, I know that as a society, as a culture, as a people, we don't really understand glue, right? It's complicated. Like, who knows? Maybe it's Van der Waals forces. Maybe it's something we don't have a name for yet. My understanding is that glue was one of the great mysteries, but it's like a $3 trillion industry nonetheless. Anyway, this headphone hook came with some 3M business. It's a big, thick gray pad with red labels on it. It was like, yo, when you stick this, it's going to be on forever. And the part that I stuck to the table is clearly on forever, but the part that came stuck onto the hook, less so.
Maybe that side didn't have the fancy 3M stuff on it.
Man, why would they sell one half? Why would they sell one half with the good stuff and one half with the not good stuff? If one side's going to be permanent, I want the other side to be permanent too, man.
So, I mean, my first question, which you covered, was did the adhesive come in some kind of brand name configuration, which you said yes. It was labeled 3M. I guess my second question then is, even if it says 3M on the label, do you trust that these days?
I think the headphone hook came from a reputable headphone hook kind of vendor. I believe I bought it at Jeff Bezos's Amazon.com. The number one place that I know of to buy stupid shit like headphone hooks. I'm going to find out what the brand name is on the headphone hook. It was Is
it pronounceable?
Yes. It is the Anchor, all caps Anchor, from the Elevation Lab store. Elevation Lab, I guess, is the brand. And it was, I paid $13 for it, which feels like a lot for a headphone hook. It's rubbery and soft, so you don't like gouge up your headphones when you put them on and off because you don't look at it. It holds 2 pairs of headphones, which is nice because I had 2 pairs of headphones that I use on my desk and I like to, have them both hanging. But yeah, I got to say, the amount of stickiness between the Anchor and the pad, pretty disappointing. And it definitely did come with the pad pre-attached. It even says mounts in seconds. That was true. With European-made 3M adhesive. Look, I don't know its provenance.
Fine artisanal European 3M adhesive.
Look, it's all I know is that I would trust that more than the stuff that's made in America, probably, because you know how the American factory goofballs.
Yes,
everybody's hopped up on goofballs over here.
Man, this thing really does look like an Anchor. So this one, I have a confession.
Yeah, fine.
This one mounts on the underside of a surface.
That's what I wanted. Yeah, I wanted it to be invisible from the top.
I too have a forever headphone hook.
Yes.
That came with pre-applied adhesive, which I'm pretty sure was 3M.
Yeah. Was it from Europe? Do you know?
It may or may not have been from Europe, but I can't remember for sure if it had 3M adhesive or not because it's been so long since I put it on that memory has long left me, which is to say this thing's been on for like 10 years.
So I purchased this on December 5th, 2021. I am pretty sure that 2.5 years, which is about where we're at from December 22, 23, 2.5 years. I am pretty sure that is not permanent adhesive. Wait a second. I just read something about this item. Guaranteed to hold strong, : we recently upgraded to an even stronger European-made 3M adhesive. We guarantee it. Contact us if you have any issues. I'm going to have to contact them and get another pad.
Okay.
But I bet I have the American-made 3M adhesive made by the people in the factory, hopped up on glue. They're sniffing glue down there at the 3M factory.
Well, hey, lucky for you, customer satisfaction guaranteed.
Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad. Hello.
Look, we've reached the point where we're doing this podcast now where I almost forgot the name of the podcast there as I said welcome and I was like, wait, what's the name of the podcast? And then I got it. I pulled it out.
I don't even know what to say to that. Were you thinking of a different podcast or were you thinking of no podcast?
I took a really good nap this afternoon and I spent yesterday at the water park. So I'm a little tired. Like I'm a good tired, right? I'm a real good level of tired. My legs are sore from climbing stairs.
A bit discombobulated.
A little bit off. There's sun coming in the window beside me. I can't tell if it's morning or evening is where I'm at right now.
I've had naps like that. I know how that goes.
Yeah, like when you take a nap that's so good, you're like, man, is it breakfast time already? And you're like, wait, no, it's dinner.
Yes. Look, any time is breakfast time if you want it bad enough.
That's true. But anyway, I pulled it out. I know I'm here to record a tech pod.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited about our guest this week. This is, I think, his third or fourth time coming back on the fourth time back on the show.
Let's see. Hang on. I ran through this earlier. PF Sense.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Steam Deck.
Yeah. Steam Deck with Norm. I had the second one and I've forgotten it again.
Oh, it's gone.
Go back through our back catalog. Somebody help us find Wes Fenlon's.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
Bendy phone.
Yeah. Bendy phone. That's it.
Yes. So I believe Wes Fenlon is now our record-setting fourth guest. Kishore's been on 3 times, right?
Kishore might be 4.
Is
I can't
Kishore
remember.
Also 4?
Kishore might be. They might be. They're the Chevy Chase and Steve Martin of our guest cadre.
That's right.
But Wes Fenlon, if you don't know him, is an editor at PC Gamer. He does fabulous work over there. He used to be our one of our big feature writers at Tested in the old Whiskey Media days. And is carrying that kind of legacy forward, writing thoughtful and incisive kind of, hey, here's what's going on with games kind of stuff over at PC World. He also recently started a newsletter that I absolutely love called Read Only Memo. You can find it at readonlymemo.com. And he gives you basically a weekly rundown of what's going on in the emulation world, from Mr. stuff to iOS emulation to what's going on with like post Mr. FPGA emulation.
Yes, he scored the lucrative Taki Udon interview, the first one after that Mr. Clone board was announced that I got all excited about.
Yeah, it's if you care about the current state of the art in games emulation, it is a one-stop shop for keeping up with all of that without having to like as you'll hear in this interview when we talk to him in a moment. Mm-hmm. You don't have to go read all these GitHub commits.
That's right.
He's doing it for you.
How does one aggregate all the innumerable sources of information that one would have to go through to write a newsletter like this? Well, listen on.
Yeah, it turns out what you do is you bring back the magical power of RSS, which is what we're here to talk about with Wes. Wes, welcome to the show. Welcome back. It's good to have you.
Hey, guys. I am so excited to be back to talk about, should I spoil it? Should I let you introduce what we're talking about this week?
Let's assume we already teased it a little bit and we said that we're traveling back in time to a kinder, gentler internet before social media, when social media was nascent, I guess, and RSS ruled the world. Everywhere news hounds went, you found RSS feeds and you plugged them into Google Reader. And then every morning you logged into Google Reader and you got a highly customized list of all of the articles that were most of interest to you from your favorite websites around the world.
And that sounds like a perfect way to experience the internet. Why would anything ever happen to that?
And all of those articles had the full text in them, and you didn't have to click through to anything else.
Okay, well, let's not get crazy here. Some had click-throughs for sure, but for the most part, it was a pretty straightforward. Like in the days when blogs ruled the world, back when we all went to Boing Boing and Slashdot every morning. You would literally load them up into an RSS reader. A lot of people used Google Reader. There were other tools as well. And there was some around 2010, the iPad came out and people started making iPad readers that made your whole feed look like a magazine. And it was a wild time. But then, Twitter kind of became the place that journalists went to share their work, and Facebook became the place where you posted your stuff to get mad traffic on it. And Reddit, and later on, I guess Reddit just has been the same for 15 years now. RSS faded, and people stopped posting RSS feeds, and then somebody looked at the RSS feed and was like, "Hey, man, why aren't there any ads on this thing? We need to if they're getting our content for free." And then people started launching new sites that didn't have websites at all and were just apps, or were like a front end for somebody else's app. And here we are. RSS is dead.
Yeah, it feels like maybe there was less RSS fading, or some RSS fading, and also some deliberately stamping on RSS to try to kill it.
Well, I also think that the general idea of, hey, I have a blog and that's a viable thing I can do as a like an indie journalist and a business kind of went away. right? Like a lot of that work that went on that you would have posted on your blog in the early 2000s or late 90s ended up going on Twitter or Facebook or later on TikTok and YouTube and other places.
Yeah.
And I think the internet as a whole has been worse off for that for the most part.
Has the resurgence or the rise, I guess I should say, of the newsletter, like the Substack and that sort of thing, kind of brought it back in some way? Although those are also things that need to be monetized. So I guess they don't necessarily want to give those away for free either.
To me, it feels like sort of a parallel happening where the rise of the newsletter has been like part of this response to the centralization sort of crumbling, right? Like people are seeing the problems and the cracks in the foundation of the centralization and Twitter going to shit and all that kind of stuff. And at the same time, I think there's been this big indie web movement of people going, okay, I want to go back to something small and decentralized. Now, how do I, from that small decentralized little node that is my space on the internet, reach out to other people, right? Or have them find me. And so I think that RSS sort of has come back a little bit as people going, hey, this really worked well. And it's a great way to follow 100 small websites without having to like load them all up in your browser or like get an email from all of them mixed in with your emails from the Gap or whoever is like clogging up your inbox, right?
Well, and the thing that like this all happened in the beginning because of advertising, right? Like we couldn't we've reached a point with advertising now where if you're not the biggest website in a market or you're not super indie and are funded by your readers or your listeners, you probably don't exist. There's basically no middle ground anymore. So there's The Verge, and then there's a handful of YouTube channels that are quite big and have found a niche there. But like on the raw web, there's Tom's Hardware and The Verge and a couple other places that do like PC hardware and tech enthusiast stuff. And then nothing else really, or very small sites that aren't like, that are side hustles or something that people do for fun or newsletters. And it's made the whole thing a little bit less legible, and it's kind of siloed off all the people that make the different, like Gamers Nexus and Tom's Hardware never cross paths anymore. And in 20 years ago, they all would have, right?
Yeah. So for me, I have not been a regular RSS user for many, many years, and sort of hit a breaking point just in the last few months where I felt like I've been going to the same, 5 websites that I load up every day just out of habit and like checking them over and over again. They're just like out of my bookmarks bar or autofill. And I really wanted to diversify my reading, sort of break out of that habit of reloading them over and over, and also just see what else is out there that I'm not even aware of. Like I realized my experience of like discovering new things to read has been practically nil for many, many years outside of cool links that I come across on Twitter. And hey, like Twitter is dead now and I don't want to be on it. So where am I going to find those things? And it turns out that's the indie web, and RSS is like the way to congregate all that stuff.
Can I ask, you use the phrase indie web, the indie web movement in the show notes. You've said it a couple times here. Is that the term? Are people like coalescing around that? Can I Google that and like find this Shangri-La that you're describing? Because I also have desired to go back about 15, 20 years.
I would say yes.
Okay.
And I think you could do a whole other episode that I'm probably not the person equipped to talk to it, although maybe I would be in a few months, which is I think you would pronounce it posse, which stands for post once on your own site, syndicate everywhere. And that's what a lot of like smaller bloggers are trying to get into now, where you have some sort of system set up for yourself, whether you've programmed it or you're using a service to write stuff on your own site, but then send it out to Mastodon, send it out to Blue Sky, send it out to Twitter if you still use that, send it over RSS, send it over email, whatever, right? Like try to get it out to everyone. And then there's sort of a whole system of stuff that's kind of trying to give feedback back from that. Like there's a standard called web mentions, where theoretically someone's website could kind of understand that you have mentioned it on a social media network and like feed that into a comment, right? Rather than having to like have a comment on your own system. That's like a whole complicated thing that is going to take many years, I feel like, to coalesce into like the next era of the internet, if it ever happens. But yeah,
we had that in blogs. They were called pingbacks or trackbacks.
Oh yeah. Yes. And then Tumblr came along.
Wes, when you said you sent me this pitch. You were like, hey, I have an idea for the show, and I'm going to read it because it was really good. And I've never said yes to something faster than this, I think. but you said, hey, I have this, I've been dialing in on this self-hosted RSS setup the last couple of weeks, and I'm really loving it. And I was like, yes, please, let's do this. This sounds great. So like, why are you doing this yourself? Because you could just use like Feedly. There's a bunch of like post Google Reader RSS tools that kind of will do this thing for. Well, I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Maybe I guess the first thing is, what's the experience for you as a reader?
What is the experience
what are you
for
getting?
Me as a reader? What am I getting?
When you pick up your phone or your iPad or whatever in the morning and you're like, I want to read some news.
Yeah.
What do you see now?
So what I see now is I set up two things. One is a self-hosted RSS server that the reason I pitched it to you and the reason I did it in the first place, something you guys, and I'm sure most of your listeners can relate to, is just like, here's a new tinkering project I can do that sounds fun, right? Second reason to do it is it saves money because I already have this home server that I'm like spending electricity on. Why should I go out to some service that does RSS and pay them $5, $10, $15 a month when I can do it for free? And then I can customize the shit out of it, right? So my experience is mainly I'm using an app on my Android phone that connects to the self-hosted RSS server via a Google Reader API that I assume is an API that hasn't changed in like 16 years or 20 years or something from whenever they set it up. That API still works. And there are a bunch of open source apps that support that API. So you basically can set up your own RSS server, and there's a few good options. I think most or all of them support this API. And then there are a bunch of open source reader apps that also support the API. So you basically just put in your server IP address or, whatever like host name you have it set up on, and put in some authentication info, and then you just have your RSS feed, on your phone or on your laptop, whatever device you want to use. So I've just set up like a ton of categories for stuff that I want to read daily or weekly or intermittently. I use it to kind of get an overview of the news in tech and games and pop culture. And I use it for cool little indie blogs that I want to push myself to read more. And I use it as like a big catch-all repository for stuff that I'm reading for my newsletter, which is about emulation. So I've got like all these GitHubs that I follow, right, where people will do GitHub commits. And like, do I want to read every GitHub commit? No, it's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of commits across all these different emulators. But I just have them all centralized in one place now. So I can just kind of look through that list and go like, what's going on with RPCS3, the PS3 emulator, look through a bunch of the commits. Maybe I see something related to a particular game or some technical term that I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And click on it and see if I, find something interesting.
Does GitHub really expose the entire commit history of a repo through RSS? I had no idea. That's amazing.
Oh yeah. GitHub is really good about it. Like GitHub does mad RSS. I've said mad twice now this episode. That's how excited. Like I'm going back to early 2000s slang at this point.
One of the fun things about this process has been finding out how many RSS feeds are still out there. Like almost every website you use has RSS feeds hidden away somewhere. They do not always make it obvious, but most of them do have RSS. And sometimes it's way more specific than you would think, like the commit history on a GitHub page.
We'll get into this a little more as we go here, but I did FreshRSS, which is the main one you're here to talk about. I know you've got some others here outlined as well, but they have a live demo that I played with where you can just mess with the service on a test server, which got me to go out and look at some video game news blogs because I go through video game news all the time for the Next Liner podcast every week. And in some cases, like that classic RSS icon is still right there in like the masthead or whatever. In other cases, like in the case of Polygon, not to put anybody on blast, I found their RSS feed by Googling and finding a tweet from 2011 that was the only way I could find it because it was nowhere to be seen on their website unless, somebody might even be yelling at the radio right now that, it's right there, but I couldn't find it on their page. But I found a bit.ly link from a 2011 tweet that actually still got me there. So like, you're right. It's not always like super easy to find. And then, like we said, the content of what you're going to get in there also is not necessarily very consumable either.
It is quite funny that like finding RSS for a lot of websites does feel like this almost, video gamey or like adventure movie thing where you like open the door into the dusty like closet and you go and you find the treasure chest that's like buried under 30 pounds of rubble, and you open it up and like there it is, like hidden still in immaculate condition underneath all the dust and the grime, right?
The sacred serial data.
So I spent many hours doing that treasure hunt as I was setting this all up, and then sort of towards the end of the process, I realized like, oh, people make Chrome plugins and in fact entire services that just immediately surface the RSS feed of any website that you go to for you. So I did a lot of like going to a website and typing /feed or /RSS on URLs, trying to hunt for them when I could have just been clicking a button like in my browser toolbar. So it's actually quite easy to find them if you just take the 10 minutes it takes to like install the right thing first. So that's a tip for anybody who decides to go through this process themselves. Do not waste your time actually looking for the feeds, because there are things that will help you with that. But it was sort of a fun experience at the beginning of the process of being like, where would these guys be hiding their RSS feed? How would they have titled it in 2009 when they built this website?
For what it's worth, the RSS feed is often embedded in the header of the HTML page. So when you load up the page, Polygon, who we put on blast earlier, has both an RSS XML version and just an RSS feed, both available for their front page and for their entire Polygon. Everything tagged Polygon, I think. It's visible in the header, but like the modern browser doesn't really explode. Like Firefox doesn't expose that anyway, right?
And
like
you're talking about like in the page source.
It's in the page source. Yeah, I had to open the inspector and dig in. But yeah, so okay, so and then you sit down and read these, and are you just getting like blank? Is it like a ebook formatting for your articles and stuff, or are you seeing multiple categories? How is this exposed? Like, how do you scroll this?
Yeah, so there's the actual reading experience in the app that I've been using is pretty good. Like I can customize, the fonts and like spacing and padding and like all of that stuff if I want to get into it. Depending on the feed, it will usually pull in images pretty well. That kind of varies based on the website, and I don't know if it varies based on just the way they've set their site up or the feed itself. I'm not really sure, but like sometimes you get everything. Sometimes you're kind of missing some little embeds and stuff, but it's very easy to like click through and read on the website itself if you want that experience. Part of my goal with the RSS was having a nicer kind of just reading form in terms of fonts and presentation than a lot of sites give you with ads or like harsh web design. But then sometimes some sites you click through and like it's a really nice reading experience, right? So that's sort of it's just been nice to have that option. But in terms of sort of the overall presentation of the stuff that I'm looking at, I've got a bunch of different categories set up that when I open my reading app on my phone, I usually just like back out to the unread page and then have all my feeds like closed rather than open. So I'm just looking at the top levels. So I've got like movies and TV, gaming, newsletters and indie blogs, patch notes for software I use, some web comics, fan subs for like old 80s anime stuff, and then like San Francisco specific news and tech. And I'll just click on one of those categories and drill down to either the kind of combined feed of the stuff in that category, or usually I'll just go by site. So like under tech, I'll pop into The Verge and see what stories they have. Most of them, I'll just read the headline and then swipe it to kind of read, because I'm not super interested in the individual story. But then sometimes I'll see one and go, oh, I want to read that. And then I'll click through and read it.
Is there a benefit to marking things red in this particular interface? Like, is it the kind of thing where if you don't mark things off, it's going to get on top of you and make things too much of a hassle?
So the default setup in FreshRSS like purges stuff after I think like a month or something. So it's not going to build up to where I have like 70,000, unread articles or something. It's mostly just sort of like for the sites that I'm going through that post a lot of stuff and that I want to read often, it's kind of just like clear out the days or the last couple days stuff just so I can kind of see what's new, right, and see the headlines. I think there's also sort of that just like, I don't know, that innate satisfaction of just, swiping left or right on something to indicate your interest in it, right? Just like, no, don't care about that. Don't care about that. Don't care about that. So that when I go back to that unread feed, it's a little smaller.
Wes, we're both too old to have had that interaction. The other question I have is, can you use this to organize stuff? So like when you're doing your newsletter every week, are you finding the articles that you want to tag and you can like apply a tag or something to them so that then you can come back and say, okay, these are the articles for the week of September 23rd or whatever?
So FreshRSS does have a ton of power tools if you want to use them in terms of like putting labels on stuff, a basic favoriting system. I've been using it a bit more simply than that so far, in that when I'm working on the newsletter, I'll just like load up the feeds and sort of read through them. And then when I find stuff that I want to write about, I'll just like copy it over to my CMS where I'm like drafting the newsletter. But I have been doing like, favoriting some stuff that I either want to read later or that I know will be a good fit for like the next issue, but I'm not working on it at that exact moment.
Cool.
But yeah, I've seen some interesting systems people are using to like connect an RSS reader, or like FreshRSS in this case, to a read later app. If you want to add that like extra level of reading specificity, I guess you could say. And like, I haven't gone that deep yet, but we'll see if I get there.
Brad's nodding his head. I'm shaking my head. Okay, so what's the tech stack for this look like? What did you have to set up on your server? What are you running on your devices? Like how complicated was this all to set up?
So I imagine this will differ based on like the type of server different people run and what RSS self-hosting service or which app you want to go with. There are a few other alternatives. The one I went with, FreshRSS, was widely recommended and also widely recommended as like easy and simple to set up. So my server now runs on Unraid, which I wish I had done it years ago, because after hearing you guys talk about Docker and the entire Linux community talking about Docker, and me just being like, oh, that's containers for apps. Well, that sounds useful, but I'll just keep bludgeoning my way through the Ubuntu command line. Ever since I've switched to Unraid, every time I can just install something by clicking a button and then it's just installed and working, it blows my freaking mind. So that was my experience with FreshRSS. I literally looked in the Unraid community app store. It was on there. I clicked install and then typed in a port and a password, and then it was running and I could just open it and it works. So I basically did fuck all except click on a button that says install.
Are the Unraid plugins Docker based?
Yes, they are. Okay. And they have their own kind of specific subset of that I guess just works with sort of the templates for Unraid, but you can sort of look at the wider, you can basically search within the Unraid store, it's free stuff, but the Unraid repository or whatever. And if it's not in there, you can look in the wider Docker community and install stuff that way, but you might just have to do a bit more configuration. But if it's something that's within the Unraid store, then it's incredibly easy to set up usually.
Unraid works a lot like the way the Synology community stuff works, or the Synology community packages. No Synology package for FreshRSS, but I did find a quick and easy install guide that's 23 steps and has a lot of good pictures. So
for what it's worth, I dug into the documentation to look at the manual setup a little bit, because of course I did. And it's full on, you need to be running your own web server. You need the full stack configured yourself if you want to run this. And they're full on hey, we've got sample Nginx and Apache configuration files here for you. So it's probably not the easiest thing to set up.
If I had to do that, I would have been absolutely clueless of where to start. I'm looking at the requirements they list, right? And they're Apache 2.4, PHP 7.4. Yes. And I don't know how to configure any of that stuff. But I do know how to click the install button and then create a user account, which is basically all I had to do.
So any kind of Docker based solution for this should be pretty simple.
Yeah, that was my experience.
are you running this open to the web, or are you just doing it in your own network for now?
That was my biggest question.
I'm just doing it in my own network, and I think it would have been fairly easy to set it up so that I could access it externally, but I already have WireGuard on my phone. And so I'm just like, why go through the extra effort of trying to expose this when if I don't want to read something that's already cached, I can just put WireGuard on and it takes, 10 seconds to like update the feed on my phone.
It really is kind of remarkable how much WireGuard obviates the need to open ports and leave things exposed to the internet. Like I was just out of town for 3 weeks, and like when you think about it, 99% of the things you're going to access your home from are devices in your possession anyway. It's like a laptop and a phone, right? You don't really need those ports open for the whole internet, right? When you can just VPN from the 2 devices you ever use.
I just think about the editor revolt we had at Future when they made us start using a VPN to connect to the internal mail and stuff. And like what a pain in the ass the Cisco VPN that they chose was. And if we had used something that was like, you just click the button and it switches over, it would have been like, nobody would have complained. We would have just done it.
Cisco VPN poisoned the well for the entire concept of VPN for a whole generation.
A couple of years ago, they were going through some security concerns as we had acquired like a financial based publication or company, and they were trialing getting us to like virtual desktop in to some remote systems to access like our mail and everything. And, they ran at about 20 FPS, something like that, with several seconds of lag. And we did a 2-day trial. And then we just said, nope, we will not be able to do this. We can't work. Thankfully, that problem went away.
So you have FreshRSS running in a Docker container on the Unraid. Is there any other server stuff, or is it all just client from here on out?
That's it. Well, there are a few other tools that we can talk about that sort of like support this RSS ecosystem I'm building for myself, but FreshRSS is like the only necessary one. The other ones are sort of just like added bonuses for helping with some cases where like, if a website doesn't have an RSS feed, what is the way that you can still kind of create one from that, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say that was my big question: is what if they don't have an RSS feed, if there's a paywall, if there's if the RSS feed is a truncated one, which was a real controversial choice in like 2005. Mm-hmm. But basically what it means is you'd have like the first paragraph and maybe an image in the RSS feed, and then there'd be a link that was continue reading that takes you over to where the ads are displayed on the web page.
Yeah, so there's like a few little solutions we can talk about that I also installed that can help with some of those cases. But like the main thing is I just installed this thing and like I had 90% of what I wanted kind of out of the box with FreshRSS and a lot of configuration options to get it set up. It was just super duper easy. So much easier than I like possibly expected it to be, like I feel like there's so many times where I want to mess with some home server thing and end up getting in either way over my head or like the exact way that I'm thinking I want to configure it, like isn't possible without a ton of effort. I can get like 80% of the way there. And this one was just like, bam, just like out of the box. It's great. And RSS is pretty, it hasn't changed a lot, I guess, in the 20 or so, 30 years that it's been around. So a lot of it kind of just works.
One of the things I like about FreshRSS is it has a plugin architecture, which I think is where you get into some of the things that like scrape the pages that don't have RSS feeds and stuff like that. Like I think you said you hadn't dipped in too much into that, but I'm curious if you've looked at any of those. The list on GitHub is pretty good. Yeah,
so they have a bunch of plugins, or like I think they call them extensions for like modifying the way FreshRSS works a little bit. So the main thing with FreshRSS is when you're importing a feed, it has like, it sort of assumes that a feed is going to be, or like the default choice is like it's an RSS or Atom feed, right? Which are like two slight variations on the same thing. From what I've read, like Atom is the newer form. It doesn't really make a big difference, which one. Like most sites do not offer both, and there's very minor differences between the two. So either of those, you can just like pop it in, and that's your standard RSS feed. It also has a feature called HTML plus XPath web scraping, which is like above my head. I tried to mess around with it a little bit and like didn't really get it to work, but that's basically for say a blog that doesn't have an RSS feed, but has very standardized page elements, the way they use headers and everything. If you kind of have some basic, I guess, web programming knowledge, you can look at the source code, tell FreshRSS using these XPath kind of like standard forms, this is what a header looks like. This is what an author looks like. This is what like where the date is on the site. And you can basically configure an RSS feed that way, where you're telling it kind of, here's how to understand the site and now create a feed for me. There are services that do this for you. So after I messed around with this for a few minutes, I was like, I'm just going to use somebody else's tool that can do this without me having to like learn how to do it myself, basically.
And then there are also like a lot of sites now, especially sites that are text heavy, have a markup in the HTML that lets like read later services and things like the reading mode for your browser and stuff like that know where to pull out. Like recipe sites all do this so that you can import them into your recipe manager and stuff like that, which is really convenient.
Is that something they want done? Because it seems like everything else has moved in the opposite direction, right? Of like, truncating the articles in the feed and not wanting you to read the whole thing because they want you there clicking the page to see ads. Like, I'm surprised that full text is actually even exposed in some way.
The thing that the way that the web browser people kind of bribed them into doing it is they display the inline ads in the read later mode. If you have the tags and you mark them as images appropriately, so they'll show static ads in those pages. If you use like when it became a default browser feature on iOS, it became something that like they had to pay attention to and kind of engage with. And that was the solution. I use that fairly often in Safari and that's how it usually works. Like the Atlantic and Economist and stuff like that.
Yeah. So there have been a bunch of people building tools kind of like that for RSS. So the biggest one I've been using, which I also installed on my server, again, really simple setup, is called RSS Hub. And it is its own little community of people who are super into RSS, who create custom feeds for websites. So it just gives you a little like bookmarklet or like Chrome extension button in your browser. And so when you go to a website, it will do a couple different things. It will, one, look for the native RSS feed on that site and just surface it for you, which is handy. And then two, if that site is in their repository of like a couple hundred, I think, websites that they have built custom feeds for, it will also show you those. So in some cases, that's a website that doesn't do feeds based on their like tags or categories, right? But like, say you go to The Verge and you only want to read like automotive stories. I don't know if they have a tag for that, but someone for RSS Hub might have been like a fan of The Verge and a fan of automotive stories. And so they created a custom feed that just looks for everything tagged that and like turns that into a feed, right? And RSS Hub, you basically can put in the like connection to your self-hosted server. So I have a button now on the toolbar where I can just click like preview to see the feed, or I can click FreshRSS and it like deep links into FreshRSS in my browser and like adds the feed into FreshRSS without me even having to copy paste, which would be easy, but it's just awesome to be able to hit that button and then it's just there.
That was my next question, is like, how do you have to always open up the FreshRSS page to add new feeds to follow when you find a new site? And that solves that problem, it sounds like.
Yeah. And the API for the Reader app can also do like the adding stuff. Like it syncs, I guess, bidirectionally. So I can just be browsing a website on my phone and go, oh, I like this site. Like if I can find the feed for it on my phone, I can just click the add feed button in the app and put the link in and then choose which of my categories I want to put it into. And then it's there.
Can I ask real quick, since we've mentioned Google Reader and its API, and it sounds pretty central to this whole setup, what is the state of Google Reader? Does it even exist? It hasn't existed in a while, right? And B, is assuming it's gone, or just knowing Google in general, is there any concern about support for that API kind of just vanishing one day, throwing all this into chaos?
Google Reader's been dead for years, right?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, so they shut down Google Reader a really long time ago. The API, though, is just a series of calls and responses, and like it lives independent of the service, right? So like the FreshRSS implements the server side, and the clients implement the client side. So I assume somebody recreated the server side.
Okay, so it's
Google Reader shutdown, right?
So it's all just publicly available and open.
I don't know about open.
Yeah, I don't really know the details of that API, but it seems like if the people are still using it, like it's not contingent on a Google server somewhere that could shut down and like ruin the whole thing. I think it's just a really long held just kind of communication format at this point for clients and RSS servers. And so it's just like people just still use it because it's been around since RSS has been around, more or less.
Got it.
So on the Google Code Archive page, there is a Pyre feed, which is the Google Reader API.wiki, and it says, "Hey, this document is totally unofficial. You should not rely on anything in this document if you need exact information. Google Reader API has not been officially released. It's been made by reverse engineering the protocol mainly. And then there's a lot of spelling mistakes too, which is always a good sign. But like,
that makes more sense because I was reading in the FreshRSS documentation. They were talking about, I think the way they phrased it was like different readers or different clients understand the Google Reader API slightly differently. And I guess that would make sense if they've kind of had to reverse engineer this whole thing.
So in the old days when Google Reader was still a valid thing, like there were a bunch of different clients and they each implemented some subset of API features. Some were just readers. Some would let you add stuff back. Some would let you tag and sort and favorite and all these things. And some of them kept that stuff, the things you did local. Some of them sent it back to the server. My assumption is that they made the Reader API public, and that at some point somebody went through and was like, okay, here's all the calls that our server needs to respond to in order for these 10 most common Google Reader readers, terrible way to say that, connected to it. So yeah, this is like when the City of Heroes people reverse engineered the game server, except for I don't know that anybody ever actually leaked the server code to the people doing that.
But that's turned out great. City of Heroes is alive and well and officially recognized now.
So what you're saying is this indie web resurgence is going to bring back Google Reader. I love to hear that, Wes. It's been great having you. We'll see you next time you're on.
Yes.
But no. Okay. So then I assume that there's also solutions for things like, I pay money for the Washington Post. And if I want to read those articles in here, I assume I have to do some shenaniganry with the logins and RSS feeds and all of that stuff too.
Yeah. I haven't messed too much with paid for sites, but I did, as a part of this process, like part of this was getting me like to read more stuff. Right. And one of the things I decided to do was, okay, I'm going to finally subscribe to Defector. Like I keep seeing Defector headlines that are fucking great. I want to support independent media. Like I'm going to go for a subscription for them. So I subscribed, and I can't remember if the RSS feed was not surfaced to me before I subscribed. I think it was, but then you would go click through to an article and it would say, like log in to read it. But since I subscribed, I can't remember if I got a subscriber only feed or something. But it's like, it just has been working fine. I can just read full versions of articles with no issues. And a lot of sites that do the, click through to read function, the Reader app that I use has a basically like scrape the whole page button on it. So I can just press that and it will usually be able to pull in everything that would be after the fold without having to click through. It doesn't work great on every single site, but it works like 90% of the time. And that service I mentioned a minute ago, RSS Hub, actually has specific feeds on some sites where people have gone on and gone, oh, their RSS feed only feeds you the first few paragraphs. Here's our custom feed that we built that does pull everything in. So that's like another way to get around that pretty simply. And yeah, it's weird. Like there are certain sites you go to that you assume they have a paywall that would affect RSS. Like Vulture is like a site that I read regularly for TV and movie news. And, once you've read like 3 articles a month, they want you to subscribe. the RSS feed will just give you everything. Like there's no paywall on that. So, I don't know to what extent, like how ubiquitous that is on sites that paywall, but it's pretty nice to not have to like incognito mode every story that you want to read on a website because you've used up your 5 article limit or whatever.
So for what it's worth, it looks like my example, the Washington Post just has on all their index pages an RSS link at the bottom of the page when you scroll all the way down past the infinite feeling part of the page. So like it's still there. Like they never turned it off, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know whether to feel good or bad about the fact that RSS feels so like forgotten or like by the wayside now, that all of these sites that have locked down the reading experience and like monetize the reading experience, so many of them just still let you get everything via RSS. Like it's such a minor number of people using it, I guess, that they just like don't even care, or the people building the sites at this point don't notice. I don't know.
I wonder if they even have tracking on it, honestly, like if there's a 3,000% spike in RSS this week, would anybody notice? Okay.
Very good question.
So we've got ways to do paid stuff. We've got it bypasses a lot of the kind of paywalls on a lot of things, which, like I said, I feel I have mixed feelings about that, because I'm happy to pay money for sites that I use a lot. Like I pay for a multiple half dozen or more sites on any given month. Mm-hmm. And but I mean, I get there's nothing stopping you from paying that and still using RSS too if it's a site you like. So that's always good.
Yeah, I feel like for me, I don't want to. I think in general, if it's a site that is like really a paid site for like most of their content, I don't think you can get around that with RSS, or maybe you can, but that's not what I'm using it for. Like I'm not using it to like cheat at getting defector articles, right? I'm using it to avoid the annoyance of sites that do not make you be a member to read their stuff, but do throw up obnoxious paywall, things once you've read an arbitrary number of articles, or throw lots of ads at you, right?
The other thing that I miss from the RSS days is I used to have a section of blogs. Like I had a whole category of blogs that were updated pretty infrequently. But the content was always good.
Yeah.
And in the era of social media where the person who posts the most usually gets recognized the most, a lot of those, you lost a lot of that kind of content. And like the ability to bring that back and have that low frequency, high value column back in my feed reader is really, really compelling. I'm going to have to get the Docker install and follow the 23-step process for this.
That has been my number one joy of using this thing, is that I have my biggest category is newsletters and indie blogs. And a lot of those blogs are ones that maybe update weekly or monthly or, tri-monthly, like very infrequent updates. But when they do, it's somebody writing about something interesting that they really care about. Like I follow Cable Sasser's blog, the co-founder of Panic or founder of Panic. And I think he probably only writes on his blog like a couple times a year, maybe. But when he does, it's like, hey, I just preserved like 73 wax records from like a Disney acapella group.
The Cinderella post?
Yeah. Like he does incredible shit, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, this is stuff that I just was not seeking out and finding before. It's something that I would only find because I followed this person on Twitter and they tweeted it and I happened to see it at that time. But because so much of that is like fracturing now, the frequency of seeing those little, once in a blue moon, like gold nuggets is so reduced that I was just like, fuck it, I have to go out and find them.
So then the part that's missing from all of this is hey, what are the sites, like the Delicious equivalent? Do you I don't know if Brad, you ever use Delicious. We use Delicious a lot at Future because we used it to share bookmarks that we were going to talk about on the weekly podcast every week. So we would basically, Delicious was a link bookmark sharing site. And you would say, okay, here I'm putting these in the Maximum PC or the PC Gamer group. And we would dump out 20 things. Everybody would just, anytime they saw an article they wanted to talk about the podcast, they'd chuck it in the group. And then whoever was the host would go through and pick the 5 or 6 that they wanted to read that week.
That's funny. We never used Delicious, but I am sitting here thinking like maybe I could just make my own RSS of the news for the Next Planer podcast to send to the other guys every week. Anyway, go on.
Did Delicious have much in common with Stumble Upon? Were those kind of similar offerings?
So StumbleUpon was more for
a dig, right?
We got a lot of traffic from StumbleUpon back in the day because it was mostly people who were high and looking for something that would entertain them. So they'd hit this button, and what it was a browser add-on, a browser extension that just gave you a button that was like, boom, give me a random page on the internet, and you'd get some random weirdness. So Delicious was much more like, hey, like, this is going to shock you both, but in the old days, your browser didn't sync the bookmarks between all of the instances of your browser, and bookmarks were also very important back then. So you could connect Firefox to the Delicious extension, and it would replace the Firefox bookmarks with Delicious, with all the stuff you'd saved in Delicious, which meant that when I wanted to save stuff to the Maximum PC podcast list, I just hit the bookmark button and put the right tag on it, and it would just be there without me having to go to a website or anything weird. It was and also there was a nice web front end for that I could access from literally anywhere there was a computer, or share with viewers if they wanted, or listeners if they wanted.
You know, I think browser-based bookmark syncing is probably what got me out of using RSS. I think I, like, for a little while used RSS in Thunderbird, and that was kind of my way of tracking a bunch of websites for a few months or maybe a couple years. And then I was just like, I'm really only going to the same few sites. I'm just going to bookmark them. And now, you know, it's 2011. I can sync my bookmarks in Firefox across browsers, or whatever year that became a thing. But yeah, I was never really a Delicious user, but thankfully there are now sites that are really focused on this idea of collecting cool small blogs and giving you like a great place to browse through them. And they often have really cool like web design too, because all the people making this stuff are all like just big like web nerds, and their whole thing is like, I want to make a blog that's beautiful. I want to make a website that, you know, links to all these other websites and like uses all the latest, like, you know, whatever like CSS, you know, design tricks I can use. So yeah, there's some really cool stuff out there. Should we go ahead and talk about those websites?
Yeah, you got some shout outs? Go ahead, Brad.
Before we do, I have to ask, speaking of internet stuff for nerds, are you still a Thunderbird user by chance?
Not in so long.
Okay.
But I will shout out PC Gamer's news editor, Andy Chalk, who is a ride or die Firefox Thunderbird user. After the apocalypse comes and there's no longer an internet, he will still be finding a way to use Thunderbird. I am quite sure.
I respect it. I put about a year and a half into Thunderbird the last couple years ago, and like it's still going.
And he still uses RSS via Thunderbird. Like ever since Google Reader died, I think he's been using Thunderbird for RSS. So I was like very excitedly telling him about like my RSS setup and like showing him all these feeds, and he's like, that's a lot of feeds. I just like use the ones for to follow the news websites I need to for work. And he's got a simple setup, but hey, it does the job for him.
Yeah, there was a whole, I distinctly remember the moment when I was like, wait, I only read 7 blogs in my RSS feed now. I'm just going to set Firefox to open all of them when I launch the computer in the morning. And then those 7 blogs became 4 blogs, became 2 blogs, became Twitter. And, you know, here we are.
Yeah, you know, like this probably sounds stupid, but just in the last few weeks, I've like multiple times had this feeling of just like shock at how much internet is out there. Like it's something that you know, but I like feel like I've awoken from like a 10-year slumber of just experiencing the internet largely through the few sites I would go to all the time, seeing headlines on like message boards and links I would click on via Twitter or like a couple other social media platforms, right? Like there are so many people out there who just run their own little website where they're writing about their life or stuff that they think is cool or stuff that they're making. And there are so many sites that are dedicated to bringing those people together or like referencing them. So many people have interlinked little blogs where they're talking about each other. And of course that's out there. Like logically, I knew that, but I just wasn't seeing it. And you have to put in the effort to go and see it. And then it's just like, holy shit, the internet that I used to experience by randomly clicking through categories on Yahoo to like find somebody's gaming fan site, like that stuff does still exist. It's just so far on the outer reaches of the internet. It's like in ways that we've lost, or at least I have lost, like the muscles necessary to get there in my brain, that I'm like relearning how to walk, further than the 3 feet away from Twitter, it takes to find something.
I mean, I love everything I am hearing here. To me, all this just sounds like we're one step closer to bringing back Webrings at this point.
Dude, everybody in this like indie web sphere has a blog roll on their website where they link like the 30 other blogs that they like to read and like their friends and stuff. And I just keep stumbling upon these and being like, well, that sounds cool. Well, that sounds cool. Well, that sounds cool.
Do they have like a list of discs they have out from Netflix at the same time? You usually had the blog roll, and then you had like the list of discs you had out from Netflix. Maybe you had like the book you were reading.
I have seen some of that. I have seen some of the currently reading, currently watching. And there are the occasional blogs where I'll go to where like they're still doing like location check-ins of some kind, like geolocation, geocaching shit. Also, like, I don't know, there's people who are still doing some very 2000s internet stuff out there, but which is fine, good for them. But for the most part, I'm just like finding cool websites connected to cool websites. And, there's more out there that I can possibly read, but it just has given me so many choices and like, stuff to save for later in the feed and eventually read on a quiet Sunday or whatever.
This is all very cool. Do you have like, if people want to do this and they want to get started with, hey, I don't know how to find blogs, and like Boing Boing got weird in the last 20 years.
Yes.
Like what's your jumping off spot? So
the first one I discovered, I believe I found this through the blog roll of my friend Alex Wiltshire, who's a former editor for Edge magazine. He works on like Minecraft stuff these days. Is a site called ooh.directory, OOH.directory. And they describe it as a place to find good blogs that interest you. And it
straight up looks like Yahoo in like 1996.
It really does, right? Except a little prettier.
Except with like a weird circa Windows 3.1 color scheme of some sort. It's not exactly hot dog, but it's kind of in that vein.
So it has like 2,000 blogs on it, separated out into a bunch of categories, like arts and media, humanities, recreation, science, personal blogs. And like there's interesting stuff in all of those categories. Well, I don't know if the government, politics, and law category is interesting. I haven't ventured into that one, but the ones that I have ventured into, like I've found a cool couple things that I wanted to start following from each. And it's just like, this is one of those sites I was talking about where you go onto it and you're just like, well, this is just like a nice looking website. Like this is cool. People are still just making websites that are not for their benefit. Like it is not monetized. It is just someone who really wanted to collect a bunch of good links and preserve them for other people. So that's a good one. There's another one. This URL is a little bit hard to say. It's RSS Joy, but it's rs.sjoy.lol is the website. But this one is like a fully RSS based page that will refresh like every few hours and is just like a bunch of collected links, basically. So these are just all like raw RSS feeds from a bunch of different independent bloggers that you can see like some of their most recent articles to get a taste of whether it's somebody you would want to follow. And again, it's just kind of like a nice looking website, very simple list of links.
I clicked on a link that's called Inside the Plume Superpods, which I think is a Wi-Fi mesh network from Virgin Media from like 5 years ago. And it's just a bunch of really good disassembly pictures, but also Plume Superpods is a funny series of words.
I highly recommend Molly White's blog roll. She's the creator of Web3 is Going Great.
Molly's fantastic.
Which is really good. And like she has built something on her site that I really envy because she's actually a programmer and I don't know how to do the kind of shit she does. But she built her own like microblogging service that is part of this like post on your own site, syndicate everywhere system where she basically built her own Twitter that's just her Twitter feed, her micro feed, and then it posts to all of her other channels. So like if you follow her on Blue Sky or Mastodon, you're seeing the stuff that she's just posting on her own site and it's being replicated there, which is really cool.
I feel like I owe her an apology for something that I have only ever thought to myself and never said out loud before. But I've only ever seen, it's a blog, right? Web3 is going great.
Yes.
I've only ever seen that reference through its Twitter username, which is just it's at Web3 is great.
Oh no.
There are so many earnests like Web3 crypto AI grifters on Twitter these days that I took that to be earnest.
Yeah, it is the exact opposite of that.
I took it to be earnestly promoting Web3. I had no idea that was the tone of it. Now I am going to look at this.
Yeah, if you go to web3isgoinggreat.com, you'll see down in the corner, as of recording time, the number $72.971 billion, which I assume is her rough running tally of like how much money has been wasted in the Web3 space. I don't know what that is sourced from. I assume, she has a little explainer. What is the grift counter?
If you scroll down the page, you will see that number going down. And then as you scroll back up, it will go back up. So I think it's keyed to the timeline, the chronology of stories.
It's just all from like the rug pulls and everything from Web3. So that's cool. But anyway, Molly's blog roll links to a bunch of other great sites to follow. And if you're kind of like wanting to dip your toe into this idea of like people who are publishing on their own sites and kind of writing a lot about small websites, the kind of re-rise of blogging, I guess you'd call it, people who are writing about tech and finance and crypto and just kind of all kinds of web-based, contemporary media shit. Like she's a good place to start.
Wes, can we post the show notes for this so that people can just click all these links instead of having to read these out? Is that okay?
Absolutely. Yeah. Fine with me.
Your show notes are so much more professional and well-written than ours.
Before we were going to do this episode, I was just like, okay, I've gone through the process of setting this thing up. If I don't write it out, I'm not going to remember like anything that I did or what I'm using. And then I'd get on this podcast and I would just be like, RSS is cool. You guys want like, I wouldn't know what to say. So yeah, that was just it was for my own brain, but happy to share it with other people if it's.
This is like the hey, when I do something on the server, I have to write down what I did so that when it breaks in 2 years, I can figure out how to fix it. Is a key part of doing stuff on the server. That's like you're building your own service. It's going to become an important part of your life, and if it's going to break in the future, you need to know how to fix it. So it makes a ton of sense.
I want to shout out a couple quick ones that I think TechPod listeners will love. One of the indie sites I started following is called 500 Mile Email. And it's a list of stories that people submit to this. I guess you'd call it it's a newsletter, but it's like a list of crazy software bug stories, basically. Like, here's something wild that happened with my company's server, and like, you won't believe what the issue was. Or
this looks very good.
I don't know if you remember the episode of 99% Invisible about like Roman Mars's voice or something about his podcast.
The Mazda virus. Yeah, I remember.
I've crash Mazdas. That's on here.
We've had people on the TechPod server with that same problem with the Mazda entertainment system. I think it was like certain characters it couldn't interpret correctly or something like that.
Yeah. So like, that's the kind of story that this site collects is really good. I started following a blog that's been running for years. I'd never heard of it, called Sandwich Tribunal, where a few people looked at the Wikipedia list of sandwiches. I guess Wikipedia has a list of like everything that is considered a sandwich. And they were like, what if we tasted and reviewed every sandwich on the Wikipedia sandwich list? And so then they spent years doing that, basically.
Wow. Look, I don't want to say anything about what people choose to make the work of their life, but anybody who's going to put the St. Louis hot salami sandwich next to the Nashville hot chicken, I can get behind. This is the Lord's work as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. There's one on the homepage called South Australia's Fritz and Sauce. And it just looks like some like raw bologna on white bread with ketchup smeared on it. And, they dedicated 500 words or so to reviewing this sandwich, maybe 1,000.
That looks awful. I am going to steal that image for this podcast show art and credit them and link to their blog. That looks horrifying.
So yeah, there's so much good shit out there that like I was not reading. And yeah, it feels like, the veil has been lifted to some extent. And also I got a cool hobby project out of it.
Like everything you've described here sounds super fascinating, and I'm sitting here going, man, I should read more of this stuff. If only I could break myself of this like mental need to constantly be scrolling Twitter, because my brain tells me like, where else am I going to get this density of people's thoughts in this short of time? You know, it's like I can read 12 different people saying 12 different things in like 30 seconds. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm still fighting that impulse for sure.
Like it's not a healthy urge, but it's something that's like, do you have any advice for breaking yourself of that?
I mean, I just got so disgusted with Twitter, just Elon Musk in general, like can fall in an open manhole as far as I'm concerned. And then just the experience of using the website became so shitty, right? Like there were just so many bots and spammers and everything that I was just like, I don't want to read this site unless I absolutely have to. I really do enjoy right now Blue Sky as an alternative, just in terms of the types of people who are into it. But it is so much lower volume that I have not found it something that I am glued to in the same way, right? Like I follow some people, there's a few updates every, like I'll probably get, 30 tweets an hour or something, 30 skeets an hour. Sorry, Blue Sky people.
They're still called tweets. It's fine.
And so that hasn't I guess that kind of weaned me off the dopamine hit a little bit. And yeah, I don't know. I think maybe just everybody has a different breaking point for when you get fed up with like your own browsing habits, right? Like for me, it was realizing that I would just go to the same few websites all the time, even when there wasn't anything new on that website, and just being really sick of that reflex. And then I also got a little bit of a nudge from the fact that for Read Only Memo, which is my emulation newsletter, I was using Feedly for a little while to like collect a bunch of RSS feeds, but it was the free version was like quite limited in how it would let me categorize stuff and what it would let me do. And I kept trying to do things that would be like, oh, well, you can do that if you start paying us, $10 a month. And I was just like, man, screw this. Like I can do this myself without paying this website. And also I can start reading other things other than emulation GitHubs and enjoy it a heck of a lot more. Yeah.
Why would you want to do that?
It is some juicy reading sometimes. Yeah. Really, really great nuts and bolts stuff.
Wes, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. Where can folks find more about you and what's the URL for your newsletter?
The URL is readonlymemo.com. I'm hoping someday that there's a .memo TLD. We'll see if that ever happens. But for now, it's readonlymemo.com. And you can follow me on Blue Sky. I assume if you just type my name into Blue Sky, you will find me.
What's the top level? Who owns the .mo top level domain? You could do, or .emo, I guess, would be the other way to go.
I don't think there is a .emo, and I think I looked into .mo, and it was a country.
It's Macau.
Moldavia.
It was Macau.
That's Macau.
Yeah, I looked into that, and you need to be like a government registered business or something, and I was like, probably not worth the complication of that.
Well, thanks for coming by, Wes. We will see you soon. This is fabulous.
Yes, thank you so much. Before you go, let me ask you one more question.
Yeah.
For my own edification, what's your next self-hosted project to tinker with? Any other fun stuff in that space that you're eyeing?
That's a good question. So talking about Molly White's like microblogging feed, I was just looking into services that like help you post across like Blue Sky and Mastodon. And stuff that can like do the web mention shit that we mentioned earlier, or a website. Because like I moved my newsletter from Substack to Ghost earlier this year. I don't host that out of my house because that felt like a bad idea to run that on my home server.
Not a great idea.
So I just run that off like a really affordable hosting service. So I was looking into like, is there some self-hosted thing I could do to like run the microblogging or do the web mention stuff? And it all seems way more complicated than my skill set is really primed for. So I think I'm just going to wait and see if people kind of keep chipping away at those problems. So I don't have anything yet, but I don't know. I'm sure I'll come up with an excuse to worm my way back onto the podcast with another project in the next year or so.
Yeah, you know what they say, when you have a home server, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah. Do you guys have any like kind of ones that you're eyeing, that you're thinking about doing for a future project?
No, I've been kind of out of the game for a while. I've got like Plex and Jellyfin set up, and OwnTone, which is a music server for AirPlay targets, and not a lot else at the moment. I was running Cups, the print servers, to make an old printer AirPrint enabled, I should say.
Interesting.
My brother laser is from 2008, before AirPrint was a thing.
So I did that, had that working, and then my brother printer that was from 2008 and was before AirPrint started making horrible noises every time it printed. So I just replaced the printer with one that didn't make bad noises.
Yeah, that's fair.
And it has AirPrint now.
Yeah. Ours still works.
I've got to figure out the posting once and blasting it out everywhere thing. That's my next big project. It looks like it's gotten a little bit more manageable in the last 6 or 7 months, but it's still very much in the, hey, first install 35 dependencies, and then you got to generate OAuth tokens and get dev dubers for all the different sites you want to connect. So
yeah. That's something that I hope you get into, Will, because I want to listen to you talking about how to do it, because I don't know how to do it, but I'm very into this idea. So I think if there is a Tech Pod episode about it in the future, I will be right there to listen to it. I'm excited for that future.
I'll say that the last thing I've thought of, which is like I have zero time to tackle something like this, I would love to run some public game servers, like specifically for Quakes 1 through 3 and maybe some other older stuff like that. But I really would want to like set up a reverse proxy outside the house to point to stuff like that. And that's a whole can of worms.
So at the risk of running a little bit long, I got to tell you about something that I did set up on my home server for earlier this year. So I hit 10 years at PC Gamer, and one of my fondest memories, Will is feeling his age right now. I'm sorry, Will.
I just turned to dust, Wes.
One of my fondest memories of like right when I started at PC Gamers, we would occasionally play some Unreal 2004 in the office near the end of the day, always Instagib. Nobody would play anything but Instagib. And, you know, the game was 10 years old at that point, right? It was not the hot shit, but you could still pretty easily just kind of jump into it, jump on a server. Servers are all shut down for that game at this point. Like the whole infrastructure that Epic had running is all gone, but you can still totally find custom servers out there. Anyway, that's a long roundabout way of getting to this service called AMP that I'm running on my home server that cost like, I think I paid about $10 for the software. But they have an incredibly easy to use interface for running game servers. So you pay for the license for it. It's not a subscription or anything. And they have servers for, I don't know, maybe like 75 games. And they basically did the work for you of taking all of the weird like INI formatting shit you would have to do for every different game server that does everything differently, and built it all into their one like consistent interface. So people basically make modules for games. And then if that game has a module in AMP, it's extremely easy for you to go in and just like natural language go, yes, I want to choose CTF from the dropdown. I want to choose like, you know, gravity level. I want to choose 50 kills, you know, to end the match or whatever. And that stuff's just all really easy to set up. So I'm just running that in a Debian virtual machine on my server. And we had an afternoon where we played a couple hours of Unreal 2004, and it was absolutely delightful. But it supports a ton of games, including, I'm sure Quake 3 is on here. It looks like they might not have Quake 1 or 2, surprisingly. Maybe there are just good solutions for those already. But they support a ton of... Go ahead, Will.
I was going to say Linux GSM supports Quake 1 and Quake 2, but it doesn't support... But it's kind of sketchily documented, and it looks like you can do Quake with the legacy module for this. This is really cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's, you know, it was totally worth the small amount of money I paid for it just to play Unreal 2004. But you can also set up modern servers with it really easily. So like Valheim, you can set up, for example, and then you can play old stuff like Half-Life Deathmatch and Day of Defeat Source. And I mean, they got all kinds of shit on here. Conan Exiles, Don't Starve Together, Icarus, like stuff new and old. Open Red Alert, if you want to play some Red Alert or original CNC.
Like that sounds great.
All kinds of stuff.
That sounds great. The stumbling block for me is like, I don't mind exposing my home IP to my friends, but if I was going to make it a public thing, I would want some kind of obfuscation there.
I mean, I assume it runs on Debian pretty easily. I assume you can go to can you just do is it DigitalOcean, like droplets? Can you just set up
that's exactly what I was thinking is running.
Yeah, it probably costs you $3 a month or something.
$5 a month. Yeah, it's more just the mental cognitive overhead of figuring out how to set up a reverse proxy or something like that on a VPS like that, and then point it to my house. And that would be a lot, but it would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, a little bit of latency for people who you don't know, so your friends have a little bit of ping advantage too, Brad.
I'll give my friends the direct IP.
Nice. Yeah. So I highly recommend this service if you do end up wanting to set up some kind of server, because God, I spent so many hours trying to understand the Unreal 2004 documentation and how to set all that stuff up. And then I just found this thing and it was a few clicks and typing in, first to 3 flag caps, done. Game's on.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming by, Wes. As always, Brad, we've reached the portion of the show where we talk about the reason we're here.
The reason for the season, the podcasting season.
Yeah, it's spring. It's the season of podcast. New podcasts are blooming around us constantly.
Listen, man, I can tell you from the last 18 years of my life, every season is podcast season.
Truer words have never been spoken. We're here for the listeners, Brad.
That's right.
As always, Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod is a 100% listener supported show. If you would like to join the cadre of listeners who make the Tech Pod possible, you can go to patreon.com/techpod. Again, that's patreon.com/techpod. And for $5 a month, you get access to the monthly exclusive patron episode where we kind of just ramble on about whatever we're working on, whatever we're thinking about at the moment. Sometimes those things, those ramblings turn into other episodes. Sometimes they just live there forever.
Yep. Occasionally we'll dig up our old Usenet posts or something.
Yeah. They're a venue for embarrassing ourselves. You also get access to the TechPod Discord, which is full of 2,800 something of the nerdiest people on earth.
Said in the most lovingest way possible.
Yeah, I absolutely love it there. There's always something interesting. As somebody, I realized the other day when we were talking to Wes, when we recorded this interview, that the thing that I loved about Twitter in the early days was that I got to talk to a bunch of interesting people from all around the world. And the TechPod Discord is like a microcosm of that. There's a bunch of interesting people who live around the world. I find out new things about places in the world I didn't know about. People share their goofy in-joke license plates that they got on their new cars, which, by the way, very good. The person who sent me that one, that was excellent work. I'm not going to out you because it was in a private message that I got shown that. But everybody's done. It's a delightful community of people who probably have a lot of interest overlap in you, and you might learn some new things that you're interested in you didn't even know existed before.
That's right. I'm sitting here racking my brain trying to think of what are some cool things from the disc. I know a programmer on there who maintains a DOS virtual machine with a fully functional DOS build environment because occasionally he still likes to write DOS software.
Yeah. Is it it's wide and deep both, which is rare.
Right.
So
that's right.
You can find out again how to join by going to patreon.com/techpod. For $5 a month, you get access to everybody you get access to the Discord, you get access to the community of people, you get access to the patron exclusive episodes, and you help support the show, which we really appreciate.
Yes, we do.
And I guess we've reached the part of the show where we thank our executive producer tier patrons. We thank everybody who supports the show, but especially the executive producer tier patrons, including Andrew Slosky, Jordan Lippett, Paddle Creek Games, makers of Fractured Veil, Octothorpe Bunny Redacted, Twinkle Twinkie, David Allen, James Kamek, and Pantheon, makers of the HS3 high-speed 3D printer. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Yes.
And that will do it for this week's edition of the Tech Pod. We will be back next Sunday with another show. We will see you then.